Time for the Tesla and Palantir weekly update. And first, I have just the Tesla chart on the weekly chart here, and it is essentially just the Fibonacci level, right? If you remember this right here, it is from the all-time high down to the January 2023 low, and this Fibs, they held, right? The halfway Fibonacci that I talked about the whole time, it actually opened the week above it, did go a little bit below, but closed the week pretty close to the resistance of the 382. So essentially, that 198 was really important, as you saw in the past right here, right here, right here, and in the past, right? And sure enough, it held perfectly just like I thought it would. And now that means I can put on the Ichimoku here. And this is showing an even bigger picture what's really going on. And what really happened is it closed the weekly candle back above that baseline of 204.90. And essentially, that means it's working its way up towards resistance here. And essentially, that resistance is still the 382 with the combination of the conversion line up here at 224 and the bottom of the cloud, which sits exactly at maybe next week. It'll be around right here, 219.80, right? So that'll be a big resistance point going into next week right there. This big zone, right? From 219 all the way up to 224, maybe even the top of the cloud right up here around 225.87 or 226. So this zone could be a challenge to break through. But one thing I wanted to point out though is the SMAs here on the weekly chart. Look what happened, right? It just broke back above both of them. So in reality now, this is going to be even greater support than the baseline. So that means the 50 sits at 209.17 and the 100 week moving average sits at 206.21. So that means that is going to essentially be your new support zone. From 209 down to 204.90, right? This is your new support zone for Tesla. I want to see weekly candles continue to close above there and so on and so forth. But why did price not get higher than this 216.12, right? Why did price close right there? Well, I think the answer could be in the daily chart here. So you put on the daily chart and look at that, right? Look at that. It couldn't close above that level simply because this bottom of the cloud was really right there around 219.23, right? And what was today's high? It was 219.80. So essentially, the bottom of the cloud rejected that today. But the good news is it got above every single daily moving average, right? It got above the 50, the 200, and the 100 down here. So on the daily chart, it looks like it's just a matter of time before it breaks back into the cloud and breaks above that 382, 221.26 level right there. So once a daily candle gets above 219.20, I think it's time to challenge this big resistance area. And when that happens, I think price will be able to go towards that baseline up here at 223.80 and towards the top of the cloud in the future. So it's looking more and more bullish every single day, and it's great to see that this is all now support again and no longer resistance. So this is really good to see. And just going back to the weekly chart one more time before I change screens, essentially, I want to see 209.17 hold, and I want to see eventually get back and challenge this resistance zone. And soon enough, I want it to break above that 382, that 221.26 zone, to be in this new trading range once again. And next I have the Tesla on my linear scale GAN, and this is even more confluence of why price could not break above that level today or this week. Well, look at this angle right, or this arc right here, this orange arc coming down, resistance, 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 still resistance, right? I thought for sure when it broke out, it's going to flip it to support, but it was not ready yet, right? So now where do you see price? Well, once again, it's right back at resistance. So that's even more proof of a confluence of everything else I just mentioned to you, that this is the reason why it could not break above. So essentially, I want to see a weekly candle next week possibly open above it, and that could challenge the 220s and beyond up above, right? So that is what I'm looking forward to. forward to. If it opens a new candle below it, then that could still be some resistance before it gets to those 220 levels that I mentioned before. So let's pay attention to the weekly candle open on Monday to see if it can open maybe above 217. If it can open above 217 for the week, then I think there's a good possibility of going back towards that blue angle in the 229 zone. But again, like I mentioned, there's still lots of resistance from the 219 up into the 224 zone. So first, one level at a time. But the first thing I want to see is a weekly candle open above that 217 level for a continuation higher. And next, I'm going to bring up this angle chart that I've shown you many times in the past, and how this blue angle sloping upwards held as support, and how this light blue sloping down was resistance. And then I thought it was going to hold as support once it broke out, but it didn't. But look what happened today. Look what happened today, right? This week closed back above it. So now that's even more proof that maybe this 209, 210 zone below can possibly still hold it as a support, right? So again, if price opens above that 217 level, it can continue higher. But if not, if it opens below, it could retest that support down below, 210, 209 possibly. So that's why I think how the week opens tomorrow could be very important for the direction Tesla really wants to go. But this is a very positive development right here. I want to see this angle hold as support now. I really do. Now that there's like a V bottom here, I want to really see this support hold for a continuation higher. And lastly, the thing I want to show you is my log Gann chart here. And this told the whole story the whole time, right? So this high, going back in time, this high could never close a weekly candle above this previous high. So it never made a higher high. And that means it's still kind of in a downtrend, right? But since it couldn't break this previous resistance, it had to go back and retest support. And that support was the arc, right? You can see it was resistance, resistance, support, support, resistance, support. So this was a previous resistance zone. It was a breakout with a successful backtest. And that's all it needed really for a continuation higher. So this is a great development that we're seeing. It did fall farther than I was thinking, but still, it retested support perfectly, and it's just like magic, kind of, right? It just hit it on the nail. Like 182 was that line, that arc, and it hit 182 exactly. So it's unbelievable how accurate that was. And even more so, we'll put on some different indicators here just to show you what's going on. So starting with the bull market support band, and what is that exactly? Well, you can pull up the settings here. It's the green line is the 21 EMA, and the red is the 20-week SMA right there. So you can see it's finally back above that bull market support band, and that's really good. That's a very bullish sign for a continuation higher, and that means that price is once again bullish for Tesla, right? Even though it's still not making higher highs from here, it's once again bullish for Tesla, which is fantastic. And not only that, when you put on the Bollinger Band here, it's even back above for 2 weeks in a row, right? Well, it actually continued. Like ever since here, it broke out. So it was just a successful backtest of that Bollinger Band, right? The 20-week average as well. So essentially, this is really, really positive, and it's also upward sloping. And that means there could be a continuation to the top of the Bollinger Band around 249 right there. So essentially, this chart is looking fantastic. All that exists above again is the 219 to the 224 resistance, all the way up to the 230s again. So we'll see if that can break, and if it can, I think price can challenge these 290s in the future. And next is Palantir, and Palantir I have the Fibonacci pulled up, and this is really important what you're seeing here. Essentially, the 618, I believe, has officially been flipped to a support. So a big development here. That really means to me that if price can get back up to the 7-1, the 3368, like the $33 level, then that could be some resistance, and possibly worst case price could actually come back and retest this zone. So a previous resistance. You can see it was resistance. It never even got up here before in the past, right? But now a previous resistance looks like it could be flipped to support. So this is a very positive and very bullish development for the future. So I think $30 is going to be your level of support now, no matter what happens, right? So that'll bring me to my linear scale Gann chart here. And I'll just take off that Fibonacci right there. And essentially, what I see for this is that price did even close back above that arc up there, and these angles are very, very important, right? You can see this one held as support perfectly, even during that very, very scary moment on Monday last week. That was the exact bottom of the angle there, which was a great opportunity. And sure enough, it just went from one angle to the next in one weekly candle. That was monstrous, right? Very, very huge. And essentially, that angle also got flipped back to a support. So this is a very, very good development for Palantir on linear scale, which means that it could even continue higher now up to the $33 level that I was talking about, which is around that 7-1 fib that I was talking about. And that could be the next target before any consolidation. So I really think this blue level is going to be hit going into next week. There could be some continuation. And now, where does that leave support? Well, it's going to leave support here with this angle right here, right? And that angle right there is essentially for next week is going to be around $30, right? That is support, which coincides with the Fibonacci 618 level around $30 as well. So just more confluence that angles are getting flipped to support, the Fibonacci levels are getting flipped to support. So I don't see really much lower than $30 anymore based off of what I'm seeing. There could be some wicks below, yes, but what I'm seeing is price probably wants to gravitate higher now because it even broke some levels here. But next, I'm going to show you the log scale just to see some more confluence. And next is log scale here. And one thing I want to point out on log scale is this angle right here, which I was talking about for a while, how I wanted to see it flip to a support. So that has the possibility to do so next week. So going up this angle, you can see it was like a resistance there, bullish engulfing, back test, flip back to resistance. It couldn't hold it as support. And it was a resistance riding it all the way up. And where did price close with this right now? You can zoom in. It closed literally a little bit above it, right? That is fantastic. So does that mean it's going to explode higher? No, not necessarily, because what if next week opens flat right here? If it opens flat, that'll open below it, right? So if it opens at like 3208 right there, or even 3210, that'll be below that angle again. So I want to see kind of like a mini little gap up on the open next week, possibly right up here, maybe around 3270 or even like 3240, 3250. I want to see a weekly candle open, not close, but open above this angle next week for a possible continuation into that 33 zone. And then what becomes possible is this $35 zone that I was talking about here in September. That puts that $35 zone earlier, or even $36 earlier on the table right up here if it can flip this angle to a support. So I think how the week opens can determine the future of Palantir next week, because if it opens strong, there's continuation possible. If it opens weak, then there could be a back test into the 30s one more time. So it might depend on where it opens next week. And one thing I want to put on for you is the Bollinger Band for Palantir and show you that the Bollinger Band is at maybe 3096, right? That blue line is at 3096, and right now the price is at 3208. So it's a little bit extended. And you can see in the past, you can see the last time it was above the band, it consolidated pretty quickly, right? So that's one thing I want to see is the continuation to press this Bollinger Band more. I want to see more expansion. You can see it's starting to expand both ways now. This is what I want to see. I don't want to see weekly candles close underneath it, because once it starts closing underneath that, then there could be some weakness and could retest those lower levels. So I'm going to pay attention to this Bollinger Band into next week. I'm also going to pay attention to where it closes or opens the candle next week, and of course where it closes. But essentially, I think $33 is possible next week. And I even think depending on where it opens, that possibly not next week, but maybe in the weeks to come, that even $35, $36 could become possible too. But it all depends on if this angle can get flipped to a support. If it can get flipped to a support, then it's game on. But if it stays as a resistance all the way up, then it could just take more time to get to that $35 level.